Hi, poison friends. It's just me today. Adam had some stuff he had to take care of this week, and there's just a lot going on. I'm going to be doing all the things. So this is fun. This is new. This is different. I mean, we've done this before, right? Actually, you'll see Adam in some of the regular episodes in the future, but you'll probably also start seeing my friend Erin. She's going to be joining me for some of them, the ones that Adam can't make, because otherwise it just feels like I'm talking to myself. And not that I don't talk to myself on a regular basis, but I'm just the way I typically write my notes, it's to garner some sort of response. I want conversation involved, right? So yeah, so I want to kind of to do that with someone. So the days that Adam is unable to be here, I will have my friend Erin here in the future with me as well. So it'll be us girls, talking about stuff, and you guys will love her. She's great. It's gonna be great. So, but we have a lot of fun together. So I think you guys will enjoy it as well. Now, let's see if I can act like Adam. We're gonna go jump into some housekeeping real quick. Jump into some housekeeping. Let me find my notes. Adam's always been a little bit more organized than I am, and it kind of annoys me because I want so bad to be organized. I do better when my life is organized, but the ADHD side of me is like, guess what? We were not gifted with that. So we have tiers in our Patreon. You can join, I think there's a $1 tier where you get shouted out, and I'm going to do that in just a second. There's also there's like two $3 tiers. One of them used to be $5, but we had to make some changes, and I didn't think it fair for the one to cost the $5 anymore. And Patreon's really weird about like changing tiers. So I had to there's two $3 tiers, but you should be getting all the things in those tiers. So yeah. So if I know that sounds confusing, but also someone asked me when that was supposed to take effect, because I know we just did that. Patreon also does this weird thing where it waits like 31 days or something, like I guess a month for it to take effect, just because they want to give you that long to let everybody know ahead of time in case they want to like move around or whatever. And so yeah, that's what's going on with that. I'm gonna look into it to make sure that doesn't continue though. So that after those 31 days, things actually go the way they're supposed to. But for this month though, I think I'll probably be adding some goodies as well on the Patreon for everybody in those $2, $3 tiers, just to kind of make up for the fact that that it's taking 31 days to do that. It's very specific timing, I guess. But anyway, on to our shout outs for our patrons. I've probably got this list in a different order than Adam did, so something new. Sorry for the change, but still the same names, right? So yeah, let's get on with it. We've got Nicole Crane, Zaid, Brett Moser, Lynn Rocket, Ogre to Viking, Maggie's Yarm, Maya Shostak, Sasha Rubel, Nicole Rivers, Woolly Wolf NZ, Liz Bianchini, Dixie Painter, James Mills, Bobby Sue, Amanda B, Mara Santiago, Grace Lahan, Genevieve Neve Chatrit, Jay Wint, Inken Hafner, Kiri Yorsak, Kate Leninin, I think I added an N in there, sorry, Robert Jr., Jessica Gasparini, Soy Kasumi, Thomas Huff, Glow and Go, Julia Franzoni, Lady Digitalis, which I'll be planting some Digitalis in my backyard soon. High up so the animals can't get it, mind you, but they're so pretty. Leah Marie Madsen, Ebby, Supergirl Sway, Yadmit, Creative Otter, Dizzy Dancer, Mr. Slave, The Warped Witch, Dalek Party, Jennifer Ramirez Johnson, Desiree Davis, Melissa Emmel, Lynn Simpson, Aaron Carey, Kristen Arnold, Rhino Alara, Omadi Bonnie, Christian Skretergaard, Prim Risen, Stuart Slattery, Minnesota SPT, Pungrammed 101, Caitlin Martin, Wendy Goldstone, Too Fidgety, which I get that, Jennifer Wilson Richter, Old Man Clyde, Anna Marie, Vix Lafroche, Morgan Brittingham, Kristen Muljadi, T-Bug, Pterosaurus Hex, Olive Octopus, Estar, Knitting Ninja, Sarah G, Jefferson Vargas, Donna Lanchanesi, Lauren Smith, Banana. Sorry. Chicken Banana. Serpentine Fire, Melanie the SLP, Stuart Lee, Chris Milanak, Libby, Hetty, Huntapalooza, Lisa MN, aka Schmidt, J Moon, Kelsey H, Paper Sky, Hannah Cook, Campus R, Rar, Britt Clark, Paris Longer, Andrea Shameless Agitator, Ruby Salazar, Cassandra Smiles, Daniel Soar, Jasmine, Dr. Doom, Maureen Hart, Justin Higgins, Nigel Hawkins, Judy Lowe, Nisa 16, Seamus Pict, Lisa DW, Lashia Paris, Jesse Pollard, Sarah, Jahira, Everyday Delirium, same. April, Alicia, Melefantastico, Panda Cannoli, Amber Golder, Donna Foley, Michelle Cornett, Teethwear 5, Manu S, Natsumaya Terin, Tater the Gator, that's fun, Hannah Rose, and Sherlock and Watson Ragdoll Cats. That just sounds fun. I mean, who doesn't love a good Sherlock story, you know? And his Bosworth, you know, Watson. But yeah, so we've got some new patrons there too. So thank you guys so much for just supporting us and yeah, just being here and listening to me yammer on about poisons and history and true crime and all that fun stuff. If y'all aren't in the Discord yet, and that starts with the first tier of the Patreon, and the link is permanently in there too for the Discord. But there's a lot going on in the Discord. There's like chats related to the podcast episodes, but there's also just a whole just community in there with everyone just having fun and sharing daily stuff, pet stuff, you know, sharing their pets. They've got everyone just sort of, I think we have a whole section on there now for, you know, letting people know more about yourself, that kind of thing. There's also chats in there related to the Neuromix chats that we do for the $3 tier. I believe that's usually me and Adam do those once a month. And for those who have any sort of neurodivergence, you know, autism, ADHD, OCD, we try to sort of relate all of that there. So, but yeah, there was a lot of fun in there. You know, I love jumping in, see what everybody's talking about, joining in, that kind of thing. Yeah, so if you're not in there, definitely jump in there and check it out. There's no pressure. Everybody in there is nice. You know, no judgment or anything like that in there. I know it can be kind of hard to be like, step into a new place and meet new people and stuff like that. Trust me, I don't know. I'm usually terrible at it. So, but yeah, everybody in there is just pretty chill and, you know, relatable. And, you know, it's a great time just to see everybody connecting in there. So I know it's not February, but I really wanted to do something related to some theme connected to the month of February. I had not intended to stay so long on the World War II atomic weapons, chemical, and biological warfare topics for so long. Even if we are seeing a lot of unfortunate similarities to its precursors. But you know, I like to finish what I start, and it is a very big subject. I mean, those the various happenings of World War II and you know, the atomic age and all that. So, but there are a number of themes from February we could use for subject matter. I mean, there's Black History Month, you know, various religious fasts, feasts. There's the Lunar or Chinese New Year, the Tibetan New Year. Of course, there's Valentine's Day. I mean, you know, there's always that, you know, love or I guess lack thereof and former love tied in with some motives for poisoning. So, yeah, Valentine's Day. I'm going to actually try to cover some of the main ones while at the same time telling you a true story of poison and mystery. Well, a couple of true stories of poison and mystery. So, and there's some love in there too. A lot of drama. There's a lot of drama in at least one of these tales. So, yeah, it's going to be fun. I really wanted some excuses to talk about a few of my favorite poisoners and alleged poisoners in history and One of them was a woman named Sarah Sally Bassett. Sally, or sometimes known as Sari, was an enslaved African woman of mixed race from Bermuda who lived in the 18th century. There's no record of her date of birth, but it was documented that she was considered old by 1728. Not very nice, is it? And was most likely born in the late 17th century. So Bermuda was first occupied by the British in 1609 after a sea captain named George Somers landed there in this sort of desperate um, action to save his crew as their ship was sinking. So just kind of ended up on the island. I'm sure that was a story in and of itself. The colony was officially settled by British colonizers from 1612, and a number of slaves were sent there soon after. Now, slavery in Bermuda became more common in the early 17th century, around 1616, and those enslaved include Africans, indigenous Americans, and Caribbean natives. Um, Slaves not originally from Bermuda arrived there often via Spanish ships, the West Indies, or as captives from the Americas. Now, indentured servants were also common. Many of them were Scottish or Irish exiles bound to tenant farms for several years. So basically, you've got them working on these farms and giving most of their, or at least half of their, of what they're farming to the tenant, and also paying rent in some form. So, yeah. Now, the difference here from elsewhere was that the economy of the island did not rely on slaves until later, around the 18th century, and they were not specifically brought from African chiefs to sell them as such in Bermuda. Instead, it was more like private merchants and sailors who had acquired them elsewhere, brought them to Bermuda, and would sell them that way because they still had like the indentured servitude going on to help with agriculture. So but still, by 1619, Bermuda had between 50 and 100 Black enslaved persons. So there was a mixture of Native Africans who were trafficked to the Americas via the African slave trade, and Native Americans who were enslaved from the 13 colonies. The main area of work forced on slaves was that of agriculture. During the earlier periods, especially the early tobacco plantations, then later farming of corn, potatoes, fruit trees, livestock, and poultry. Collecting sea salt was another trade that flourished there. They would literally just evaporate the seawater, get the salt, that kind of, it's a whole process. By the time we begin to know about Sally Bassett, between the 1660s and 1690s and after, much of the trade and work was in maritime and domestic service. So this is where enslaved people were forced to work mostly. And they were forced into slave positions related to carpentry, masonry, being coopers, blacksmiths, and shipwrights. So this was how they were growing the economy, that kind of thing. And I feel like this is just good to know for context. And this is also when you see more slaves in Bermuda as well. So yeah, Bermuda's whole economic system changed, and they started to rely more on slavery for all of this important work and such services. I mention all of this too because it makes the reasons for the later slave rebellions and consequences of them make more sense. I mean, rebelling against slavery just makes sense in general, but I feel like context helps all the, whatever you're talking about. So a little history. I'm just trying to give some context to how it started and then grew in Bermuda. I need to mention as well that by 1668, the indentured servant system pretty much ended as well. The Irish were no longer allowed after assisting slave revolts in 1664. There were earlier revolts, like one in 1623 and another notable one in 1653, which resulted in multiple executions and banishments, exiles, and sending them away, that sort of thing. More came about, more of these rebellions came about in 1664, 1673, and 1681, resulting in more executions. Even rumors of revolts could result in the alleged plotters' banishment or execution, even if they weren't plotting, but someone said they were. So there is some quick context of the world Sally Bassett was living in. She was enslaved from birth to a Southampton blacksmith of the Pembroke parish in Bermuda named Francis Dickinson. I mentioned she was considered old by 1728, and some are probably like, what does that even mean? Like, how was she considered old? old, right? Basically, it was known that she had grandchildren by that time, some of whom were old enough to be enslaved as a domestic servant. Of course, the children of slaves were also slaves and forced to do such work as well. So I don't have the exact ages of them either at the time of this story because even children were slaves. Most put Bassett's age in her 60s by the time of the blacksmith's death, sometime about 1726. Now, upon his death, Sally was willed to the man's children, as she, like other slaves, was considered property. Gross. I know. All of it's gross. Because of her age, it was after this that she was considered useless in terms of labor, and she was allowed to sort of work as a healer for the Southampton parish. Many enslaved women knew and practiced some form of healing and herbal medicine, as West and Central African traditions and knowledge was passed between them and onto their children as well. There were beginning to be rumors and fears of slaves, especially women, poisoning livestock and whole households because of their, knowledge of herbs and, remedies and this sort of thing. Women who knew a lot about African traditional medicines and herbal remedies were even more suspect to these wealthy white slave owners. If they knew how to heal, perhaps they also knew how to poison, right? So many of Bermuda's wealthy white slave owners started to fear being poisoned, beginning in the 1720s. And some claimed to have been victims of said poisoning already. Now, these were all just rumors, not proven incidents. There was a lot of illness back in the day too. So they could have had an illness and been like, I was poisoned. So maybe it's a projection of them subconsciously knowing slavery was wrong and feeling guilty and feeling like they would poison themselves if they were in that position. I don't know. Slavery's wrong. But instead of coming to their senses about slavery being evil and such poisoning possibilities being valid ways of getting free from oppression, they just had their own era of witch hunts. The slave rebellions plus the suspicions of poisonous plots led to a lot of false accusations and punishments for no reason, including executions. And we talked about that even with the rebellions. Of course, you should rebel against slavery. Like if you are enslaved, if you are being oppressed, it would be within you to rebel. But because these people were rebelling, they were being punished and killed. So Sally had been in trouble prior to the blacksmith's death and her being enslaved to his children. In 1712 or 1713, around that time, she was accused of poisoning and killing the livestock of a Captain John Jennings, and she was also accused of threats and property damage. She was found guilty, likely with little to no evidence, just on the person's word, and she was sentenced to 3 lashes. This is quoted, 3 lashes well laid on her naked back at the end of every 30 paces throughout Southampton parish. Now, Bassett's associate, known as Indian Tom, that's what they called him, was also charged for his involvement. Tom was reputed to be this notorious thief connected at the time with French privateers. I really don't know a whole lot about him, just what was written. And it's really hard to go by what was written during a time when people were enslaving people, because it's the people who are enslaving people that are writing this down. So. Now, on December 18th, 1729, Sally went to visit her granddaughter, Beck, who was enslaved by Sarah and Thomas Foster in Somerset. 6 months after this visit, Sarah Foster, Thomas Foster, and another enslaved woman there, Nancy, became very ill. One person in the household that was not sick was Beck. So, of course, there was some suspicions, especially with all the poison paranoia already floating about. Now, Beck was arrested and she confessed that her grandmother, Sally, had given her the toxins that had made the Fosters and Nancy ill. According to her story, Sally had brought 2 rags full of specific poisons. She's using it as a container for said poisons. One was of a white powder and the other of a red powder. Now, Beck testified that Sally told her that the poisons were a mix of ratsbane, or arsenic trioxide, manchineel root from the toxic tree found in Florida and northern parts of South America as well. We've talked about the manchineel tree specifically when we talked about was it Creepy Little Trees? I can't remember the title of the episode, but there's a couple of those episodes. In one of them, we included the Manchineal tree. I really enjoyed talking about trees, to be honest, so that was fun. Those were fun episodes. And also white toad, as it was called, which apparently was a toad with a toxic substance found on its skin. Sally would have had to actually request this. She would have requested this from enslaved mariners, as it was only found in South America and West Africa, not in Bermuda at that time. So it was said, and not many would have been aware of this particular toad or its poison. So, Bermudian historian Clarence Maxwell has mentioned that poisonous toads were used in ceremonies among Akan-speaking peoples in the tropical forests of West Africa, and that these were carried over. Other historians have actually suggested that Tom, who was considered her associate in the last crime, as we mentioned, was likely the source of Bassett's poisonous white toad, as it was called. But it did not appear in Bermuda until the 19th century. It's the main thing there. Still, these are all accusations and testimony from others. Okay, Nancy, the other enslaved woman that was in the household, testified that she had discovered one of the poisonous parcels in the kitchen, and having only looked at it, basically said that the Fosters had been poisoned. Like, I guess she saw it was a powder, and she said, "Oh, they've been poisoned." Now, Sally claimed innocence throughout, being accused and tried for the poisonings of the Fosters and Nancy. According to Beck, Sally told her to poison Thomas, Sarah, and Nancy and gave her instructions on how to use the poisons she left with her as well. Basically, she was supposed to put one of the rags or containers of poison by the kitchen so that it can be inhaled as people walked by it, as the three that she was trying to poison walked by it. The other was to be put in their food. So Sally was arrested and tried soon after this confession by Beck, who was likely trying to, save herself from being punished. She pleaded not guilty. Meanwhile, the Foster family and the slave Nancy were, as it was put, sick and lie in a very languishing and dangerous condition. However, Sarah Foster was well enough to get up out of her, sick bed and go testify against both Sally and Beck. In court, a total of 10 white citizens testified against Sally, as she was accused of both the attempted poisoning and also of being an agent of the devil. The judge's assessment of Sally was of not having the fear of God before her eyes, but being moved and seduced by ye instigation of the devil. The devil. So poisoning and witchcraft were connected a lot of the time, and the culture from which she came was seen as sort of this pagan, devilish, witchy sort of culture by these white peeps, even though there were, I think in Europe, they had their own sort of voodoo doll type thing. I forget what it's called, but they had their own like clay dolls or something like that. So, like, okay, if it's different, they're scared of it. Okay, it's the same way today, unfortunately. And this is true even though the white peeps were enslaving, robbing, hurting, and killing people. There's that. A jury of 12 white men found Sally guilty and added, "We value her at £1, 4 shillings and 6 pence." I'm not saying she absolutely poisoned people, but I do think these men deserved some of what the Fosters had. Just saying. Beck was exonerated, not likely in an act of kindness, probably more because she was still considered useful. But Sally was immediately sentenced to burn at the stake, which was actually a method of execution that was not as popular anymore by this time. But they did see it as fitting for an agent of the devil or, witchcraft. On the day of her execution, this exact date is also unknown, she was led to Crow Lane, which is it was a busy intersection by Hamilton Harbor, where a stake and wood were waiting. It was said to have been an unusually hot day, even for the Caribbean, but hundreds of people showed up to witness the event. Even today, really hot days are referred to by Bermudians as a real Sally Bassett day because of, referring to how hot it was. On the way, she was heard commenting, "No use you hurrying, folks. There'll be no fun till I get there." When she looked at the logs waiting to fuel the fire, she supposedly said, "Ain't they, darling?" Which it's like, I love her sense of humor, at least she's like, you know what? I'm done with you people. She was executed as sentenced, and it was said that she cried out that God would prove her guiltless. A legend has it that when her ashes were examined, there were these small purple flowers sprouting from them. Today, this indigenous flower, called the Bermudiana, is the national flower of Bermuda. So pretty cool. That part's pretty cool, at least. A question still remains, though. Did she give Beck poison with the instructions to use it on the Fosters and Nancy? What motive could she have had? Well, for one, the act of enslavement and experience and trauma of having been enslaved would have been enough. I mean, enslavement, lashings, watching her family, forced into slavery as well, taken away from her, really. I mean, I'd poison somebody. Just saying. However, we don't really know for certain that she did any such thing. What if the Fosters and Nancy weren't even poisoned? Like I said, there was a number of different diseases going around, especially there and then. It's not like hygiene was all that great. Um, they didn't have pest control except for ratsbane. Mosquito-borne illnesses were rampant, as were diseases spread by those traveling to and from the area. I mean, there were a lot of diseases, Maybe Beck confessed because she was scared or, tortured into it. Those killed in the various witch trials throughout Europe and in the American colonies were not hurting others with witchcraft, but their accusers in states of paranoia and religious mania were quite convinced. The people in Bermuda at the time were already afraid of being poisoned. All they, the all-white male jury and judge, at least, went by to label her as guilty was the testimony of mostly white people, likely all of them slave owners. Maybe she did do it, and it was because she was tired of the oppression. Whatever the case, at least one historian at the University of the West Indies has since cited stories of the poisonings as encouragement for further slave rebellions among the West Indies afterward. In 2008, a 10-foot bronze statue of Sally Bassett was erected and stands now on the grounds of the Cabinet Building in Hamilton, Bermuda. It's called the Spirit of Freedom, and it depicts Sally tied to a stake with her feet above the fire and her eyes lifted to the sky. It was Bermuda's first public monument in honor of an enslaved person, and it was not without some drama, as you can imagine. According to the historical site enslaved.org, controversy ensued when the Corporation of Hamilton refused a government request to place the Spirit of Freedom at Hamilton's City Hall. A racially polarized debate about these issues emerged across Bermuda's radio talk shows, social media, and online newspaper outlets. Blacks were generally in support of the monument. The community activist Nana Peggy, for example, felt that it could be a teaching aid to combat historical amnesia. Some members of the white community, however, felt that the monument glorified a criminal and was designed to make whites feel guilty. In addition, during the official unveiling of the statue, the British governor Richard Gosney compared it to monuments of the Confederate General Robert E. Lee, South Africa's Blood River Monument, and a statue of Oliver Cromwell. Many felt this comparison to Bassett via white symbols of exploitation was insulting, bizarre, and offensive. Agreed. That's really weird. And I've never understood the whole, we gotta make sure white people aren't feeling guilty. And it's like I can look back and see, I really don't know stories about my ancestors too much. I don't know a whole lot about my ancestry. I know my mom's immediate family, and that's about it. But I mean, if you told me, and it probably has happened, that some of my ancestors, had slaves or were just terrible people, I mean, I'd be like, man, that sucks. Screw them, but it would make me feel like, ugh, don't like that. Wouldn't want to be them, Sorry for what my ancestors did, but you get what I'm saying. It's not, how is teaching about oppression and warning about what can happen if you ignore hate and fear and all these things, how can, teaching about this, reminding people about this, cause guilt in white kids? It doesn't make any sense to me. And honestly, you should feel you should feel empathetic guilt about some of it anyway. You should be like, wow, that was a sucky time. I really hate that we did that. What's wrong with that? I don't know. It weirds me out though, because people still do that today here. And it's like, we can't teach about that. It might make these certain groups feel guilty. You can't teach them about something that actually happened because you don't want them to feel guilty about what happened then. Don't you want to teach them about what happened so they can say, hey, let's never do that again? Anyway, I'm sorry, getting off of it, but it's ridiculous. The next story I want to talk about is in a different part of the world. This is actually in China ages ago. We're going to talk about it in a moment, but since we celebrated the Lunar New Year, Chinese New Year in February as well, I thought it would be a good time for the story of ancient China's Empress Wu Zetian. Our last story involved women who were enslaved, oppressed, and possibly falsely accused. Now, even if Sally Bassett did poison the Fosters and Nancy, I mean, she did so likely in retribution for their further enslavement or harm of her granddaughter because she was tired of the oppression in general. Now, poisoning Nancy, I imagine that was sort of a, make it like it's not one of you sort of thing, but it backfired either way. But yeah, we only know. Still, we don't know if she or anyone else poisoned them. And like I said, they could have been just sick with something. We only know what Beck and Nancy stated happened and that the white slave owners were scared of being poisoned and were already against her. So, am I saying you should poison others as a punishment? No, I'm just saying if she did, I get it in this instance. Also, she did not deserve how she was treated or executed at all either. So, the story of Wu Zetian is full of drama. So much drama. I'm talking drama you usually only see on one of those reality television, but obviously scripted still kind of drama shows, the Kardashians or Secret Lives of Mormon Wives with a dash of murder and power obsession. So, Wu Zetian lived in ancient China in the 600s AD or CE, if you will, having been born around 624 AD. Originally, her name was Wu Zhao. This was in the 7th year of the reign of Emperor Gaozhou of Tang. A long time ago, I know. So, but China has a very long history. At this time, China was led by an emperor who would be married, but also have a whole bunch of concubines because, of course, like there were actually levels that you could achieve as concubine. There were different levels and such. Now, it was said that there was also a total solar eclipse the year she was born, which I'm sure meant, some sort of omen or some sort of, supernaturally specific thing. Now, her parents were pretty well off. Her father worked for a timber mill, and her mother was of an aristocratic background as she was born into the Yang family, and they were distant relatives of the imperial family of the former Sui dynasty. The current emperor had apparently always been kind to the Wu family, even after overthrowing their relatives, giving them food, land, clothing, wealth. So the emperor saw them pretty often, and Zetian's family was doing really well in that respect. As it was, Zetian was encouraged to read and learn to further her education in such subjects as calligraphy, history, politics, literature, and music. This was obviously a rare opportunity for girls at this time. Now, Emperor Gaozhou's heir Taizong of Tang began his reign as emperor in 626, and at 14 years old, Zetian was summoned to be an imperial consort, considered like a lesser wife or concubine, but her ambitions never languished. In fact, she saw this as an opportunity. She became a sort of assistant and later nurse to this emperor alongside her other duties. While not particularly favored by Taizong, his son Li Ji came to like her a lot. So much so that even while his father still lived, though ill and bedridden by that point, they had developed a physical relationship, a very intimate relationship, if you will. Emperor Taizong died, however, and this son became the new emperor, Gaozhong. they would change their names to, as they became emperor. So he went from Li Ji to Gaozhang. Now, as Zetian did not have any sons with Taizhang, she and other non-heir producing consorts were sent to a Buddhist monastery, as was the custom. They would have been sent there, their heads shaved to live out the rest of their lives because, oh, well, I guess their purpose is done. Oh, mean, but okay. She was sent to Ganye Temple, where she was supposed to be a nun for the rest of her life. This was obviously not the life she wanted. Li Ji became the new emperor, as I mentioned, taking the name of Gaozhang, and this only happened because his two elder and more experienced brothers had been knocked off the heir list for some scandals that led to their disgrace. Li Ji was a sickly and an experienced 21-year-old boy by the time that he was appointed emperor and named Gaozhang. But now as emperor, and who Zetian had already had an affair with before his daddy died, he went to visit the monastery where she was at to pay his respects to his late father on the 1-year anniversary of his death, and he and Zetian rekindled their affair. Now, Gaozhang was married to the Empress Wang at this time, but she had produced no children for him, and he apparently did not like her all that much. Like, basically, the women were supposed to be like popping out babies, and that was like their, I guess that recorded their value. That was true in many cultures way back in the day, and honestly, in some cultures today, maybe similar. So Zetian saw her chance to get back to the palace and possibly more. This was easier than she had imagined, actually, because there was another consort named Zhao who the Empress Wang was already jealous of because of how much the emperor's attention, like Zhao had harnessed, and because Zhao had also produced a son and 2 daughters by that point. Like, Empress Wang was like jealous and upset with this other consort. Now, the empress actually asked her husband to bring Zetian back to the palace as a way to disrupt his relations with the other consort I just mentioned. And this, of course, would backfire on her because now she just has another competitor in the field of this attention of the emperor. Now, I don't know why they didn't just join forces and get rid of the guy, since he was causing everyone so much stress. But here we are. I told you. Drama. Now, reportedly, Gaozhang became completely infatuated and obsessed with Zetian, and both Empress Wang and Consort Zhao were both out of the running for dude's attentions and favor. It happened pretty quickly. By 650, Zetian was the Zhaoyi, which was considered the highest ranking consort to the emperor. So, the title that she had. She had so much favor with the smitten emperor that she greatly influenced major decisions throughout his reign, even early on. Historians have long seen Zetian as this ruthless and power-hungry murderer, and we'll get to why in a moment. But while some of this is true, others believe that there have been some embellishments. For example, it was long believed that she killed her own infant daughter in order to blame the empress and have her removed. These particular stories of infanticide did not really come up until about 400 years after her death, though. So many now believe that these were fabricated in the retelling of her story through the many years. I mean, it was not uncommon to have nasty tales told about you as a woman of influence back then, for sure. And then still, she did some things. So let's get into it. In 652, Wu Zetian gave birth to a son who they named Li Heng, then another the next year named Li Zhen. By 654, Zetian had become Gaozhang's favorite over the empress and that other consort I mentioned, and he even wanted to replace Empress Wang with Wu Zetian. Obviously, this was not something looked well upon by the governing bodies and council, the chancellors, and all that around him, so it would take something drastic to really get everyone to be on his side in this matter. At this point, both Empress Wang and Zhao, who had been once enemies, were now teaming up in an attempt to take Wu Zetian down. So they were once enemies, now they're like, you wanna form an alliance? This kind of thing. Again, drama. Zetian had a daughter in 654, but the child died soon after it was born. It actually seemed like the child had been like asphyxiated or even strangled, according to most stories, and Zetian blamed Empress Wang for the death. Now, we can't know for sure what happened as we don't have any sort of forensic evidence or any way of getting said evidence now, but there's three main theories about what could have happened to this child. Empress Wang might have killed the baby out of jealousy of Wu. That's one theory. Wu killed the child herself in order to blame the empress to get her sent away so she could gain her title. Another theory, a common one believed. The child could have died from SIDS, or asphyxiation in the crib, or even carbon monoxide poisoning due to the burning of coal back in the day, poor ventilation systems, that kind of thing. It could have been something like that. Now, there were some who said they saw Empress Wang near the child's room before the death, but Wu could have also told them to say this, as she was getting really good at getting others on her side. She was quite charismatic. Whatever the case, Empress Wang had no alibi, and she could not prove it was not her. Gaozhong, the emperor, was angry about the death and believed it was Empress Wang, as Wu had said. So he wanted her, he wanted to be rid of her even more at this point. He would have believed anything Wu Zetian had said. So later in the summer of 655, Wu Zetian made another accusation against Empress Wang, and this time her mother too, Empress Wang's mother. Witchcraft. Common accusation at the time in various cultures, apparently. Some stories say that she also accused them of trying to harm the emperor and herself with a jug of poisoned wine. Gaozhong took matters again to his chancellors / council or whatever, and they were all still against the change of empress to Wu, one more decidedly so than the others. One chancellor finally asked the emperor why he was even asking anyone, since this was his family business. While opposed, they were obviously tired of this whole affair. No pun intended. Or maybe it was. So Gaozhong demoted and sent away the most vocally opposed chancellor, then had Empress Wang and the consort Zhao arrested. Zetian was then made empress instead. So here we are. Some years later, the emperor had thought about releasing Wang and Zhao, but apparently Wu was not a fan of that decision because she immediately ordered them to be executed. Just was like, absolutely not. So they were killed on her orders. According to some traditions, their hands and feet were cut off and their bodies beaten. Then they were thrown into wine to drown. But she claimed that their spirits haunted her dreams many nights afterwards. Like, I mean, I would haunt you. It's pretty rough. So she was so plagued by these dreams that the emperor had a second palace renovated and they moved there. But the nightmares kept happening, and they moved like a whole province away than they were in. So I guess she thought maybe if she could get away, they would leave her alone. In 656, Gaozhong deposed the current heir to his rule, a son of a different consort, so that the first son of Wu Zetian could become his heir. Like, he already had an heir, and he just was like, oh, you know what? I changed my mind. It's going to be Wu's and my first son with her, or whatever. I'm sure she had a role in that. Now, she had played the long game, okay, seeking allies and winning over those in high positions, even helping others into high positions so that she could have some help dealing with anyone who opposed her, both in the past and in the present. In 657, two of these new chancellors that she had won over accused three others of conspiring treason. Over the next 3 to 4 years, she had others in high positions accused of treason, all of which were demoted, banished, and some of them killed or ordered to die by suicide. That was how they did that to some people. Even the sons of the more vocal dude that opposed her becoming empress in the first place were executed. Like, the sons were, because the guy was already dead, apparently, and stripped of his titles. So they were just like, well, we'll just kill his sons instead. Jeez. Others she had exiled or killed included one of her son's wives / consorts. Basically, she was called the princess consort, who they basically arrested her, and the girl starved to death because, all because Wu was really angry and with the girl's mother. She was mad about the attentions that Gaozhong was giving to their mother. Really, anyone who opposed or criticized her, or stood as competition to her, or she thought, perceived competition to her, was punished with exile, death, and sometimes both. Many chancellors were falsely accused and later punished in this way. I mean, there's so many stories about things she did to people. I could only list so many in here. All the while, Wu had a total of 4 sons and 1 daughter with Gaozhong, one daughter who lived past the first daughter that was born, who died soon after. The emperor still had an eye for others, though, including some in Wu's own family. I've seen this episode of Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. I know how it ends. Well, I didn't end this drastically, but here we are. He became infatuated with Wu's sister Hailun and her niece, Hailun's daughter, I believe, Guchu, possibly having intimate relations with both of them as well. Now, the niece, Guchu, did not last long as one of the emperor's affairs, as she actually went to dinner and began to choke. This was in the year 666, by the way. But she began to choke at dinner one evening, fell into convulsions before dying there suddenly at the table. She was eating with, the emperor and Wu Zetian and the fam, But Wu blamed 2 of her cousins that she just didn't like for the death, saying that the meal was poisoned and had actually been meant for her. So it's like, oh, they were trying to poison me and they poisoned her, so it's their fault. And now chronicles of the Tang Dynasty have it documented that Wu had Guochu poisoned and then went on to also poison her sister, Hailun, in a fit of jealousy as well. So when Hailun's son, who was, Wu's nephew, became suspicious of his mother's death, Wu had him exiled and later killed. Now, some also believe she poisoned her own mother when the lady was like 90 years old, so there's that. It was also around this time that the Emperor Gaozhong had been experiencing worsening health with what are now assumed to have been multiple strokes affecting his sight and mobility. Apparently, I had mentioned before, he was not exactly in the best of health anyway. And maybe she was poisoning him too, or whatnot, but historically documented as multiple strokes that had affected his sight and mobility. Okay. He began to have Wu lead as regent in his stead after a second stroke, which, since he couldn't do much afterwards, basically being paralyzed at that point. Now, while considered ruthless and power hungry, she did enact several reforms that elevated the roles of women in society and in religion. She had um, biographies of women written and tried to sort of. But part of this might have been selfish too, and we'll touch on that in just a minute. Okay. Yeah. I mean, male emperors had also been ruthless and power hungry. She was just criticized later because she was a woman doing the same things. But we don't even fully know what was true and what was exaggerated either. This was literally ages ago, so we just have the history and stories documented as they are. Okay. So do know that. Now, she did put an opinion/complaint box in the palace for the common people to make their concerns known to her. However, this was also a place that she had the people tattle on others as well, which may have been her primary goal there. She did get quite paranoid as she aged, and she did love power if the stories are accurate. She even ended up making sure her sons could not take it from her. After Gaozhong died in 683 at the age of 56, Wu was about 59 at this point, she was expected to step down as well and have her son and heir lead. However, the crown prince, her first son, Li Hong, had died suddenly at 23, and some believe Wu poisoned him. That's like the story that goes along with that. Because he wasn't exactly quiet about his dislike for his mother's actions and policies thus far, his death had come after challenging her authority by, advocating for his half-sisters who were under house arrest and not allowed to marry. I think she was worried about them being competition to her rule as well. And he had also questioned her grasp on power. Now, she also exiled her second son, Li Zhang. Apparently, Wu Zetian suspected Li Zhang of having her favorite sorcerer, Ming Shengyan, assassinated. And after a search of his room, they found like multiple suits of armor. So she said that this was proof of plotting a coup, against her. So she had him exiled. It was also said that he was later forced to commit suicide on her orders as well. Geez, Mom. Her third son, Zhang, did reign for about 6 weeks before being exiled for boldly commenting that he could give his empire to his wife, Empress Wei, if he wanted to. And Empress Wei seemed a lot like Wu in her ambitions. So, I guess like recognizes like. So both Zhang and Empress Wei were exiled. Now, the fourth son, Zhong, was much more cautious, having seen what had happened to his brothers. Imagine. He simply led in name and let his mom call the shots. Wu said that her son had a speech impediment and needed her to do the talking. So he got to hang around at least, and he didn't threaten mommy dearest. So she let him hang around. He actually abdicated his rule in 690, which some believe, Wu kind of made him do, Zetian made him do. And this made her the first and only woman to rule over all of China in her own right, not simply as the wife of the emperor, the empress kind of thing. And she even changed the state title from Tang to her own Wuzhou dynasty. She used informants to choose people to eliminate, process that peaked in about 697 with the wholesale demotion, exile, or killing of various aristocratic families and scholars, while also prohibiting, their sons from holding office as well. She had her own secret police at this time who created a manual of accusation, which was this document detailing steps for interrogation and obtaining confessions by torture. Now, in reaction to one attempt to remove her from power in 684, she ended up massacring 12 entire collateral branches of the imperial family. As most ambitious leaders who usurp thrones and poison others, she became paranoid, as I mentioned, in her later years as well. She really just continued to accuse and hear accusations. Then she would dole out punishments in the form of exile and death. Even if there was no evidence of these accusations, she would just, take them as she heard them. Or if somebody was acting funny, she would just be like, "You're plotting against me." So there were many things that she did and ordered for selfish reasons. One of the first steps she took to legitimize her ascension to the throne was to actually proclaim herself as the reincarnation of the Devi, which is goddess in Sanskrit, the Devi of pure radiance, named Jingguang Tianu, through a series of prophecies that she kind of had made. She made Buddhism the state religion of the day, and also brought in several different societal and religious principles from India. She got several Buddhist monks, including one she was having relations with, to create an apocryphal text in which the Buddha foretells Jingguang, the Devi that she called herself, that he would be in bodhisattva reincarnated in a woman's body in order to convert beings and rule over the territory of a country. So this was her way of gaining some authority to rule as a woman in a typically no women ruling society by being like, look, it's in the scriptures, okay? Like she was trying to recreate this whole idea indirectly, if you will, like through other means. And a lot of the elite and aristocratic families hated this, which is honestly why she really hated them too. So you see a lot of them being removed from power or exiled and killed during her rule. She also had many Indians become part of the royal court, including faith healers, mystics, and astrologers. Now, some of these religious changes actually began before Gaozhong died, as she labeled herself then as the Empress of Heaven. And she and Gaozhong were referred to then as the two saints. Two saints. Yeah. And it's interesting because as a way to get where she is, she accused the former empress and her mother of witchcraft, right? And like here she is looking into things like mysticism and astrology and that kind of thing, faith healing. Anyway, so she actually started an affair with the imperial physician around 695. This was after the death of Gaozhong. But yeah. And this angered the Buddhist monk that she was also seeing, right? So, in his jealousy, the Buddhist monk set fire to the imperial meeting hall and the heavenly meeting hall. And at the time, she was very into mysticism, as I mentioned, and for some reason, she was really impressed with this hermit, who she briefly made a chancellor. And this hermit had claimed to be 350 years old. Also, a Buddhist nun who said she was a Buddha and could predict the future, and another rando who claimed to be like 500 years old. Okay, she was very interested in these three at one point. But since these three could not predict the fire that had been set by the monk ex-lover, she was really pissed off and made the nun and her students into slaves, while the hermit died by suicide, and the 500-year-old rando just fled. Also, the Buddhist ex was executed. She had also taken on two other lovers around this time, brothers, in fact. They were two of the Zhang brothers that she had grown to admire. I won't go into too much detail there, but the Zhang brothers ended up having a lot of power at Wu's side as she aged. So they hung around. They knew what they were doing too, you know. Other officials were worried they would take power after her death, so they had them killed just before the plan to bring one of her sons back, to kind of overthrow her. Like they had this plan in play. They wanted to get rid of them first, though, so they took them out. The plan was to bring back Zhang uh, into power, to get rid of his mother and put him on the throne. Now, on a more positive side, she did enact further reforms that stopped high positions in the empire slash government from being simply given to the rich and well-connected. Only those who earned it through talent and experience could have it, you know. But this also could have been due to the fact that the wealthy elites were not fond of her and she wanted to snub them as well. So that might have also, you know, been a selfish motive, but she reportedly improved the economy and standard of living as well during that time. That's what was reported, whether that was her doing or not. But still, what goes around comes around, and a coup arose eventually to remove her from power and make her previously exiled son, Zhang emperor again. So she was pretty old at this point. She's about 80 years old, and she just abdicated in 705 after about 15 years of ruling on her own. Ironically, Zhang again did not rule all that long because his wife, Empress Wei, who I mentioned had her own ambitions, and was quite similar to Wu, poisoned him so that she could take over. Yeah, she poisoned him, but her plans didn't work out so well. This whole coup, like the poisoning might have, but the whole coup trying to take over, she tried to hide his death for a number of days and just sort of like take on matters from within, but it didn't go very well. But the other more cautious son, Ruizhong, actually took the throne again, making his son the heir and later ruler of China. Wu Zetian died in 705 at 81 years old. She was buried in a tomb with her late husband and Emperor Gaozhong. And she was basically left with a blank stele, or basically a blank monument. It's also known as the wordless stele. It was left without any inscription. It could have been for a number of reasons. Could have been because, you know, she was a woman who tried to take power. Could have been because um, of how she tried to take power. Or it could have been even to let those coming after her to judge her legacy for themselves. But honestly, I think it would probably be one of the people who buried her likely did it because they didn't want to glorify, I guess, her rule or how she gained power, really. So, because at that point she was being basically overthrown, right? They were bringing back her son to take over her place, and they were killing her lovers and those close to her, that kind of thing. I say lovers, but they wanted to rule after she was dead. They had their own selfish reasons. So anyway, but yeah, that's the story of Wu Zetian. I mean, there are other things that she did, and are rumored to have done. I could only go over so many, and a lot of it's very similar to what I talked about, like having people, you know, exiled, poisoned, killed, that kind of thing to achieve power. But she was very ambitious, and she was the first and only woman to be basically emperor of China. for a time, so for a solid 15 years. But those are the stories I have for you today, and I hope you liked them. They're from, like, 2 whole different parts of the world. Um, a lot of drama, uh, but yeah, I just found these 2 I found these 2 women quite fascinating, to be honest, in their own way, so but I wanna know what you guys think. Let me know your take on these stories, and, is there anything that I didn't mention with either of these women? I'd love to hear it. But until next time, I hope you guys have a great week. The weather here has been insane. I think it's been insane all across the US. Like, some people are getting snow right now. It's March. Some people are, maybe I don't know if that's normal for some people in the US to get snow in March, but here it's definitely not. We're getting just battered by windy storms and things like that. So you guys stay safe. We'll be putting out a Neuromix chat this week. Me and Adam will be, and I've got some stuff planned for me and Camilla. We're not doing really the Camilla sods anymore, but I'm going to put something up this month just between me and her. So just as a sort of fun bonus. So, and also I've got a bonus episode coming up this week, as always. So stay tuned, and yeah, join the Discord, leave us a comment, and we'll catch you in the next one. Bye.